Section 2 of History of Rome and the Popes in the Middle Ages, Volume 1, by Hartmann Grissar. Chapter 1, The Last Revival of Paganism in Rome, Part 2. The Fate of Pagan Rites in Rome. Before giving closer attention to the internal transformation of the Western Empire and its capital, we must linger beside a few of the most celebrated shrines and monuments in the city, which are at the same time memorials of expiring paganism. Traditions or inscriptions of monuments are often still to be found on or near the scene of their past history, and speak to us in forcible, eloquent language of the grand struggles of their day. Many of the great centers of heathen religion in the city of the Tiber at that period are still known to us. Mithra worship was particularly popular among Roman pagans of the 4th century. Its fashionable votaries are frequently assembled in the Mithraeum of the 7th city district, not far from the present church of San Silvestro in Capite, and in the temple of Cybele, which stood on the site of Nero's circus, left of the entrance to St. Peter's. Several inscriptions of this Mithraeum are known to us. The most important one was discovered only in 1867, almost undisturbed beneath the present Palazzo Marioli. This made it evident that this grotto had been restored as a shrine of Mithra at the expense of a senator named Timesius Agentius Olympius. He complacently harps upon the fact that these buildings had no need of any financial help from the state. Sumptus tuus nec Roma requirit. Many members of the noblest families sought admission to the service of the Persian deity. It is well known that Mithra was styled, in opposition to the Christian Savior, Lord of the living, Giver of light, and mediator between the supreme God and the world. The worship of Mithra was in many ways a distorted version and an aping of Christianity, so that even St. Augustine could make a priest of Mithra say, "Mithra himself is a Christian. Ipsa Christianus est." In the inscriptions, 6 steps of initiation into the mysteries are mentioned under the curious titles of Corax, Crifius, Miles, Perses, Heliodromus, and Pater. St. Jerome mentions a 7th called Leo. There was also no lack of secondary shrines for Mithra worship in Rome. We find them on the Capitol, at San Martino ai Monti, in the palace of the Numi family in the present Via Firenze, at San Vitale, on the Palatine above San Teodoro, below San Clemente, at Santa Agata in the Suburba, and on the Piazza of the Lateran. Moreover, such shrines exist in the environs of Rome, for instance, at Ostia in the palace of Lucius Gamala, at Porto, Anzio, Colana, Quadrano, Capeno or Turitia, at Bolsena, Palestrina, Civita Lavinia, Petralia, Vellatri, and Terni. St. Jerome states that the city prefect Gracchus, 377, indignant at the superstitious and immoral rites involved in the worship of the invincible sun god Mithra, Deus sol invictus Mithras, broke into a Mithraeum, most likely the one belonging to the 7th district, and wrecked all the images it contained. Gracchus was a heathen, but he wished to qualify himself for Christian baptism by this act of violence, which stands alone in the history of Rome. The followers of Mithra, however, again made wide use of the freedom granted them and continued their senseless rites. The other previously mentioned center of heathen worship was close to the much frequented church of St. Peter. It was sacred to the service of Cybele, Mater Magna Deum. During excavations in 1608 and 1609, inscriptions relating to Creobolia and Taurobolia were found there, extending from 305 to 390. Thus, towards the end of the 4th century, we still have evidence of the persistence of these sanguinary rites. Owing to the Phrygian origin of the ritual observed, we have the name of Phrygianum applied to these temples and grottos in descriptions of this district dating from the 4th century. These inscriptions cast a curious light on the worldwide contrasts existing in the Rome of those days, at a period when people of all ranks flocked to the Christian fonts at St. Peter's, the Lateran, and other churches, When the cosmopolitan city as a whole had submitted to the new faith, these texts continued to speak with respect in the grand old classical language of the superstitions still practiced in those half-buried temples by the highest in the land. They celebrate the eternal regeneration, the bull's blood procures, and the purification by the most holy mysteries. They glorify the gods who have thereby become guardians of the soul and spirit of the blessed, and extol the high priest as Father of Fathers, a title which will be borne throughout all time by the heads of a rival religion at the adjacent tomb of St. Peter. In those days, religious titles abound throughout the heathen world. Even after 383, the name of Priest of Vesta is bestowed upon leading Romans. These Vestal priests must have been the chief supporters of pagan worship in the ancient national shrine of the eternal fire on the Roman Forum. The atrium of Vesta on the Roman Forum carries a modern visitor back to the latest period of paganism and was only excavated during the years 1883 to 1884 and in 1901. The discovery of this famous home of the Vestals, those virgin votaries of the goddess worshipped both as mother and guardian of the empire, has been one of the most important, if not quite the grandest, among the results of recent Roman searchings. The atrium of Vesta lies at the foot of the Palatine Hill, immediately beneath the majestic imperial palace. In our illustration, the Forum and the Arch of Titus are visible in the background. To the left, on the Via Sacra, the Temple of Antonius and Faustina and the circular Temple of Romulus are standing to this day, though since early medieval times they have been respectively transformed into the churches of San Lorenzo in Miranda and Sans Cosmas and Damian. The atrium of Vesta formed an elongated rectangle and was connected with the Vesta Temple, of which the circular substructure is visible to a considerable height. The open court, or peristylium, is surrounded by the rooms reserved for the Vestals, which can also be traced up to the second story. On the eastern side aisle of the court, the tablinum is entered, and it also is surrounded by dwelling rooms. A double row of choice marble columns divides the grand forecourt lengthwise, forming one broad center nave and two ambulatories. In the center was a fountain surrounded by an octagonal wall, which can also still be recognized. Some authorities, however, think that this spot was the site of a building devoted to the custody of the Palladium and other jealously guarded pledges of the empire's security. In any case, this sanctuary, called Penis Vestae, was in the actual temple of the goddess. This court, formerly well supplied with water and ornamented with shrubs, was possibly a reminiscence of the sacred grove which formerly existed in the neighborhood. The quadrangle, open to the sky, was enclosed by lofty buildings. In the lower rooms, gorgeous marble and mosaic, opus sectile, pavements have been found, as well as baths and a kitchen with stove and leaden cistern. The Vestals, or those who inhabited these quarters after them, also left various earthenware or metal vases, as well as a hand mill in tufa stone. A number of fairly well-preserved statues of these Vestals, with and without inscriptions, remind us to this day of the magnificent series of statues representing the chief priestesses of Vesta, Vestalis Maxime, which graced the peristylium in those distant times when no profane foot had as yet crossed its threshold. Up to the present time, 35 inscriptions are known, bearing names of the heads of this college of priestesses. Of these, 27 were found in the atrium of Vesta itself. An official formula describes each Vestal honored with a statue as most holy and most pious, sanctissima et piissima. Their chastity is extolled, as well as their intelligent devotion to the complicated and minute duties associated with the service of the goddess. Though the position of the Vestals had suffered from the public suppression of paganism, it suddenly regained fresh importance at the accession of Julian the Apostate. The dreary halls of Vesta awoke to new life and hope when, during the reign of that ruler, the pagan city prefect, Vettius Augurius Praetextatus, became their zealous patron. Praetextatus was himself a Pontifex Vestae for 2 inscriptions so describe him. On the Roman Forum, his name may still be seen in big capitals above the portico of the 12 Gods, carrying us back to the tragic times of Julian the Apostate and reminding us of his devotion of the portico of the 12 Dii Consentes, which he had restored. The grateful Vestals erected a statue to their benefactor in their own house. This was found with its inscription in 1883 when excavating the atrium. The head, lying beside it, had been knocked off, but was evidently a speaking likeness. Much earlier, in 1591, the statue of Coelia Concordia, a chief Vestal, Vestalis Maxima, was dug up from the ruins of Praetextatus's own house on the Esquiline, in the present Via Merulana. The modern find stands in close connection with the older one, for the inscription under Coelia Concordia's statue states that this had been erected by Praetextatus in recognition of the friendly courtesy with which the Vestals had accorded his statue a place in their atrium. At the same time, the memory of Concordia herself is extolled, together with her perfect chastity and signal piety in the service of the goddess. By the side of these and similar eulogies on the Vestals, some remarks by St. Ambrose should be placed. In a letter to the Emperor Valentinian, this former courtier and keen observer of Roman life points out the deep-seated difference between Christian maidens and Vestal virgins, a contrast upon which many Christians could dwell with pride when passing the stately hall on the Forum. "Let the Vestal virgins," he says to the emperor, "be rewarded by privileges from those who think that without payment no one could lead a virgin life. One must awaken the love of lucre when one has no confidence in virtue. And yet, with all payment, with all privileges, how few maidens can paganism collect? It can scarcely keep 7 virgins together. That is the whole great flock who long to drape their heads with rich infule and go about in purple robes, borne upon litters and followed by a crowd of servants. Yet even these few, with all their wealth and splendor, need only accept the life of self-renunciation for a time and not forever. Then," continues Ambrose, "let us cast our eyes on the Christians and see what thousands, almost a whole nation, lead virgin lives and are attracted to this pitch of self-denial by the simple power of virtue. If we Christians wanted to secure government pay and privileges for all these, there would be prompt danger of an empty exchequer." These words, written in 384, date from the period of the controversy between Ambrose and Symmachus concerning the withdrawal of all former state subsidies for the support of the pagan ritual. As a community, the Vestals could not long survive their loss of income and its consequences. Thanks to the liberality and refractoriness of the heathen nobility, they kept together for a time, apparently until the decisive date of 394, and it even seems as if, under Eugenius and the prefect Flavian, their exalted position was momentarily restored. Those, however, were the last days during which the temple of Vesta was illuminated by the sacred fire, which was regarded by the authorities as a sign of the goddess's watchful protection over the city. How anxiously within these now crumbled walls the last Vestal virgins must have watched the various phases of the final struggle between Theodosius and his heathen opponent! By the time the first messengers with the tidings of a Christian victory at Aquileia reached Rome, they doubtless had found time enough to bury or remove the Palladium and other sacred objects, and also to quit, unmolested, what had been the site of Vestal service during 1100 years. Recent searches among the remains of their dwelling show no trace of violent disturbance, still less of an attack by the populace. Throughout, the monuments were found standing where they had originally been erected. Only medieval times wrought alteration and injury. Of course, after the Vestals had disappeared, no one could prevent Christian curiosity from penetrating their closely guarded precincts. Such visitors could but rejoice that at last ancient delusions had so entirely vanished from the spot which past ages had revered as the most sacred center of the heathen world. They would observe and read, with some amusement, the grandiloquent panegyrics upon the Vestalis Maximae, which were inscribed at the base of the statues ranged around the marble walls. Among these rows of wonderful young women, a certain Flavia Publicia must have excited special attention. She lived in the middle of the 3rd century, and no less than 7 statues bear her name. 5 were discovered undisturbed in 1883. They had all been erected as tokens of gratitude by dependents of the rich and powerful chief priestess. Flavia Publicia is extolled under all possible titles. According to these inscriptions, the goddess herself, the most holy mother Vesta, had recognized her exceptional devotion, while the Roman state is conscious of the benefits daily resulting to it from her zeal in the service of its guardian. Those, however, who first entered the abode of the Vestals would also at once remark a monument to the Vestalis Maxima, who had forfeited her high estate. The name of this priestess had been deleted from the inscription upon her pedestal. When this pedestal came to light during the excavations of 1883, it became clear that the statue had been erected in 364. But the name of the priestess and her crime remain obscure. All pointed, however, to the conclusion that the Vestal had embraced Christianity and thereby incurred the penalty of damnatio memoriae by the college. Only conversion or infraction of her vow could be the reason for thus removing her name. Now we have no record during the last days of Vesta worship that any of the Vestals, and especially no chief priestess, had offended against their moral law. Had such a fact occurred, it would infallibly have been reported and made much of by Christian opponents of paganism. On the other hand, authorities do actually allude to the conversion of a Vestal virgin to the Christian faith. Prudentius introduces us to this Vestal, named Claudia, who, as a Christian, was the pride of the faithful in Rome, and he describes the scene where she enters the Basilica of St. Lawrence the Martyr. Perhaps Claudia may have retired to the nunnery for Christian virgins already established near the basilica. In painful contrast to this convert stands the blear-eyed, gray-haired Vestal, whose memory has been preserved by the heathen Zosimus. Heaving deep sighs, she wanders up and down through the deserted halls beneath the Palatine. Having espied Serena, the wife of Stilicho, taking the gold ornaments from the statue of Rhea, she calls down shrill curses upon the sacrilegious act, praying for the wrath of the gods to overtake an age which desecrates both their temples and their statues.